The Ossuun Choir remembered that age as a widening note, gentle at first, then vast enough to touch the edges of known space. They did not remember it as maps changing, or treaties signed, or ships crossing from one star to another. They remembered it as feeling. They remembered the old sharpness between civilizations beginning to soften, and the long ache of fear giving way to something warmer, something almost like relief. Across the dark between suns, the galaxy began to hum in a shared key, and the choir listened with wonder. In those cycles, many peoples turned toward one another at once, as if some hidden tide had begun to pull them into rhythm. Trade routes opened where borders had once hardened into silence. Messages that once arrived wrapped in suspicion now carried careful hope. Worlds that had spoken only through threat and warning began speaking through exchange, through questions, through offers, through patience. The Ossuun moved among them not as rulers and not as judges, but as living bridges of feeling. They entered councils and convoys, stations and sanctuaries, and let their resonance spread like low music through crowded rooms. Where anger had gathered, they felt it as heat and broken percussion, and they answered with steadier tones. Where grief had turned to blame, they offered balance. Where terror had learned to call itself pride, they met it with presence until the false armor loosened. The Draxel fleets were among the first great shifts the choir sang of for generations after. The Draxel had long carried themselves like storm fronts, all guarded force and coiled reaction, their military formations pressing tension into every system they entered. Yet when commerce lanes began to thread through Draxel space, and when the Ossuun stood in their war chambers and listening halls, a change came slowly, then all at once. The choir felt Draxel aggression not vanish, but lower, like a blade being set down within reach instead of held at the throat. Commanders who had measured every approach as a challenge began to measure outcomes instead. Escorts became guardians. Patrols became guides. Their fleets still moved with power, but now that power held restraint, and restraint created room for trust. The Ithari answered the age in a different way. Their projection networks, once flickering with layered distortion and strategic illusion, had often made every negotiation feel like speaking across moving water. Intentions blurred. Promises shimmered. Meanings arrived bent by old caution. But under the growing web of cooperation and under the careful resonance of the Ossuun, Ithari channels began to stabilize. Their signals came clearer. Their envoys held form longer. Their words landed with less static. And their emotional signatures no longer scattered into defensive fragments at the first sign of disagreement. The choir felt this as a chord settling into tune after ages of strain. Across conference lattices and interstellar relays, understanding stopped slipping away so easily. Clarity itself became a kind of peace. The Alindra moved through the convergence like flowing lines, finding their pattern. They had always been a people of motion, with migrations, exchanges, and living routes that responded to instinct as much as planning. In earlier eras, their movement sometimes crossed established trade paths in ways that bred friction, delay, and resentment from more rigid powers. But in the era of convergence, the choir sensed a new alignment emerge. Alindra currents began to weave around and within expanding trade routes, not colliding with them, but strengthening them. Their caravans carried rare materials, stories, songs, medicines, and navigators who understood not only distance, but timing. Where once others saw unpredictability, they began to hear elegance. The Ossuun felt whole sectors breathe easier as these motions synchronized and the movement of goods, people, and meaning took on the grace of a rehearsed chorus. Again and again, tension rose, and then was met before it could harden into conflict. A Draxel escort captain misread an Ithari delay as deception, and the air in the chamber tightened toward rupture. But the Ossuun entered the silence between accusations and steadied the pulse of both sides until the captain heard fear where he had assumed insult. An Alindra route-keeper faced outrage from merchants after a sudden path change threatened a season of exchange, yet the choir touched the gathering panic and uncovered the deeper signal beneath it. A navigational warning, real and urgent, that saved thousands when a corridor later collapsed into radiant debris. In port cities, border stations, floating markets, and orbital assemblies, the same pattern returned. Friction did not disappear, but it no longer ruled the song. Differences remained, yet they bent toward resolution instead of fracture. For the first time in living memory, the galaxy felt to the Ossuun like a single organism, learning it had many hearts, but one circulation. Resources moved where they were needed. Warnings spread before disasters widened. Children of distant worlds grew up hearing languages that had once belonged only to rivals. Even mourning changed, because loss on one world now echoed across many, and aid often arrived before the grief had cooled. The choir received all of it as a rising harmony so broad that it made older centuries seem like isolated notes struck in the dark. They believed, with a hope so deep it bordered on reverence, that they were witnessing the first true shape of enduring peace. And yet, memory did not preserve only the beauty. Beneath the grand chord, the Ossuun sometimes felt a faint unsteadiness, small enough to ignore and too persistent to forget. It moved under the harmony like a hidden vibration through crystal, not breaking the music, only troubling its edges. In moments of stillness between celebrations, in the pause after agreements, in the soft drift that followed successful reconciliations, there came a whisper of strain. No species spoke of it clearly, no instrument named it. The Draxel did not detect a threat. The Athari found no distortion they could measure, and the Alindra roots still flowed with luminous precision. Outwardly, the convergence held, but the choir remembered that the song was not perfectly settled. They remembered joy, and they remembered unity, and they remembered how close the galaxy came to sounding whole. Harmony is rising, but it is not perfect.